Well guys, it looks like the Toronto Blue Jays rumors about trades and free agency, that has officially begun. You're starting to see some credible people talk about what potential moves can be made to improve the Toronto Blue Jays this offseason. And you already know that the Blue Jays are going to be linked to some pretty big names, especially in the offense, because there's no surprise that the Blue Jays, they struggled mightily in offense this season. And it also doesn't help that the Blue Jays have a ton of offensive power leaving this team, like Brandon Belt, a breakout bat like Kevin Kiermaier, and a guy who carried the team, Whit Merrifield, he could be declining his mutual option this winter. So this definitely adds to the stress of the Blue Jays front office to go out and make some smart moves this offseason. And I mean smart because clearly we kind of overpaid last offseason. So rather than looking at all of the Toronto Blue Jays holes, let's focus on one area in particular where they find themselves pretty weak. And that area is second base. For the last few years, the Blue Jays have been carried a little bit in the second base position. In 2020, you had the breakout of Cavan Biggio, where he was actually very good. Then you had Marcus Semien, who was literally a godsend and finished third in MVP votes. And then 2022, you had a combination of Whit Merrifield and Espinal. And then last year, a combination of Whit Merrifield and Cavan Biggio. And without Whit Merrifield, you're relying on an inconsistent bat of Biggio and Espinal to try and carry the offense there at second base, which isn't bad, but it's also not great either. And with that being said, there was an article that was released by Bleacher Report highlighting every team's weakest position and what they can do this offseason to improve it. And for the Toronto Blue Jays, they had second base as that weak position, primarily because of the departure of Whit Merrifield. And Bleacher Report predicted a pretty unexpected trade candidate for the Toronto Blue Jays that they think would help fill the hole at second base. They predicted a trade scenario with the San Diego Padres for utility man Jake Cronenworth. Time for a quick shout out to Betway. Betway is the best place to make all of your sports bets on all of your favorite teams. Betway is also in collaboration with iGaming Ontario. Must be 19 years older to participate. And guys, please bet responsibly. Now, back to the content. Now, Jake Cronenworth is a pretty interesting dude to look at. Let's take a look at his career so far. Cronenworth is going to be entering his age 30 season in 2024, and he's coming off a very slippery slope of the last 4 seasons. In 2020, Jake Cronenworth broke into the league, finishing second in Rookie of the Year votes after putting up a solid OPS of 831. Now, granted, you have to also remember that was 2020, the shortened COVID year. But then Cronenworth followed up his rookie year with a solid all-star season, where he put up an OPS of 800, scoring 94 runs and driving in 71 RBIs. And he was beginning to look like a serious stud in the middle of this Padres lineup. And then all of a sudden, the dude kind of just started falling off. It started in 2022, where he had an okay campaign with the OPS at 722, still drove in and scored 88 RBIs in runs, but last year something went really wrong for him, where he only batted 229 and had an OPS of 689. And then his season was cut short after getting hit on the wrist with a pitch, fracturing it and having him out for the remainder of the season. So that leaves a lot of uncertainty around Jake Cronenworth. The dude is entering his age 30 year, and he's also got another 6 years left on his deal. Granted, these are very, very cheap years with a lot of upside and low risk. Is he going to be able to replicate the numbers he had back in 2021, or hell, even back in 2022? Or was Cronenworth simply a 1 or 2 hit wonder? But you could also make the argument that Cronenworth could just use maybe a change of scenery, like many players who kind of fall off at the end of their rookie deals. I mean, you had Whit Merrifield, who had a bad down year back in Kansas City, but when he came over to Toronto, it took him a little bit of time to get adjusted, and he ended up becoming the Whit Merrifield of old. So maybe if the Blue Jays did trade for Jake Cronenworth and you take the pressure off him a little bit, you have him split time with Cavan Biggio, who looks like he's going to be the primary second baseman this year. Maybe that allows Jake Cronenworth to get a little bit comfortable in his new position and finds that old bat that could be very valuable for the Toronto Blue Jays. And then eventually Jake Cronenworth can take over as the everyday second baseman for the Toronto Blue Jays after Cavan Biggio's contract is done. And also, just a bonus, guys, Jake Cronenworth is a left-handed hitter. So if you had the split of Biggio and Cronenworth, you can guarantee that there will always be a lefty coming out of that second base spot. Another benefit of getting Jake Cronenworth means that you could also maybe trade off a Santiago Espinal, who also has a little bit of value left at his deal that a team would probably pay a little bit for. And speaking of paying, what would Jake Cronenworth cost? Well, apparently Trade Values has him at a negative 34.2, which is completely wrong. I think they're going based off of the injury and the fact that he did underperform last year, and he is extended for another 6 years. But I do agree that Jake Cronenworth is a prime buy low candidate, which means that the Padres might just keep Jake Cronenworth rather than selling him for pennies right now. So a deal with the Toronto Blue Jays, it's probably not likely at this point, folks. So where does that leave the Toronto Blue Jays? Well, I think starting off the year with a Santiago Espinal and Kevin Biggio fit isn't a horrible option, considering that this offseason there isn't a lot of good free agent second basemen out there. Plus, if you do decide to call up Addison Barger, he does have some second base experience there, so maybe you throw him into the mix. So if the Blue Jays really do want to improve this offense, I think you're going to have to look at other areas in this team and just accept the fact that second base, it's not going to be your best offensive position this year. But you guys let me know your thoughts in the comments down below about Jake Cronenworth, and thank you so much for watching. And as always, guys, go Jays go.